The New York Giants are launching the Jaxson Dart era, but is it the right move at the right time? We're going to talk about it next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all of my written work. And as always, welcome on in to our Blue Crew community members, our everydayers, our newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. All right, Giant fans, we got a lot to cover on today's show. Kind of an emergency podcast because some big news coming out of East Rutherford. The New York Giants have made a decision regarding who is going to be their starting quarterback on Sunday, and they are going to go with rookie Jaxson Dart. Jaxson Dart promoted to the starting lineup. Russell Wilson, the starter, he is going to be QB2. Now, keep in mind, as I record this, this is all according to the NFL Network. The Giants have not officially made this official, but if it's coming from the NFL Network, chances are they got it from the Giants regarding the decision. So let's talk about this. Jaxson Dart, this is a kid. I mean, let's talk about the move first off. Is the move the right move for the Giants? Now, this is kind of what I was afraid of at the beginning of the year. I wondered if the Giants got off to a slow start, would they expedite the entry of Jaxson Dart into the starting lineup to save face, to save jobs? And I thought to myself, if it comes down to that, is that really fair to the young man? Now, I'm sure when Brian Daboll addresses this, he's going to say that had nothing to do with it, that the kid was ready. But I go back to also what was said earlier in the year and at the start of summer, how the plan was for Jaxson Dart to basically redshirt this year, let Russell Wilson do the heavy lifting, and, Jameis Winston, if they needed him, and let the kid learn at his own pace. Now, for what it's worth, yes, it's possible that Jaxson Dart, his learning process was expedited. He's a smart kid, very confident kid. I think he's going to be a fine quarterback one day. But you'll forgive me if I say this, and that is I have shades of Daniel Jones memories in my head, because if you go back to 2019, the Giants were in a similar situation. They got off to an 0-2 start that season with Eli Manning at the quarterback. And despite everybody and their uncle saying that it wasn't Eli's fault that they were 0-2, just like everybody and their uncle these days is saying it's not, Russell Wilson's fault, they still made the change because the quarterback, I guess, was the easiest thing to swap out. Now, Daboll, in speaking to the media on Monday, said that it wasn't all one person, that, it was a combination of things. But again, you can't swap out 5 offensive linemen. You can't swap out 3 receivers. You can't change out your tight ends and your running back. The quarterback is the easiest thing to swap out. Now, there are both pros and cons, I think, to having Jaxson Dart in there. The cons, like I said, is he truly ready? Well, how do you exactly measure that? Do you give the kid a test? And if he scores 100, you know that he is truly ready? Do you base it on observations which have come in practice? Which, by the way, if Jaxson Dart has been the QB2 all this time in practice, how much work has he actually done in terms of snaps against, scheme defenses? Probably not a whole lot, I would think, because the starter gets a whole lot of the reps. So with that said, is Jaxson Dart truly ready? And I think that's a question I'm going to see if I can ask Daboll in terms of what criteria do you use to say yes, this kid is ready for the bigger picture, to start. I don't want to say that Dable is necessarily using this opportunity to save face, but again, I see a lot of similarities to what happened with Daniel Jones, with Pat Shermer, desperate to unlock a level of his playbook. He threw Daniel Jones in there before Daniel Jones was even ready. And Jones, when he came in as a rookie, had some minor success. But then we went on an odyssey with him. Y'all remember it. Different coaches, different systems, injuries. It all came, crashing down. I don't want to see the same thing for Jaxson Dart. And here's the other thing, folks. Everybody talks about the Giants' difficult schedule. Is Jaxson Dart really going to make that big of a difference? I don't know that he is. And I'm not trying to diss the kid. I think he's going to be a fine quarterback. And I'm excited to see him play. But all this talk about the tough schedule, the Chargers are coming into town 3-0. Is Jaxson Dart really going to be the difference maker? If the defense can't hold, its ground, if, the offensive line can't protect Jaxson Dart, is it really going to matter at the end of the day? I don't know that it is. But you know what? Here's a reason, though, why I think it could work and why I think it's going to help the Giants. And that is by sprinkling in Jaxson Dart the way Brian Dable was doing the first 3 games, you almost set up a situation where you could have had a divided locker room. People could have looked at Russell Wilson and whatever, deficiencies he had in his game and said, why are we going with this guy when we have this young, promising quarterback on the roster? So I think part of the reason could have been that, let's eliminate the possibility of there being, a split locker room, those in favor of Dart, those in favor of Wilson. But if Dart struggles, how long until the locker room, silently grumbles and says, why did we make this change? So it's a big gamble is what I'm getting at. It's a huge gamble for the Giants, hopefully one that works out because, again, Dart looked good in the summer. But the asterisk there is that he looked good playing mostly against second team and third team offenses. He didn't really see starters. He didn't see game planning. And that, to me, is the biggest question mark I think he has to answer. How well does he prepare this week? How well does he do against scheme defenses? Because, look, defensive coordinators with a rookie quarterback, they're going to disguise stuff. They're going to throw all kinds of things at this kid to confuse him. And is he going to, at the end of the day, be a better option than Russell Wilson? He might not. To go back to, the pros of putting Jaxson Dart in there, you might as well say, look, the season's circling the drain. Put the kid in there, let him take his lumps, let him get ready, and then come next year, we start all over again. Kind of weird to say that after only 3 games, but that could be part of the thinking. So overall, I would say I have mixed feelings about this. I just hope that Brian Dable is making the decision that is truly in the best interest of the franchise and of the kid, and not just doing this because he needs to save jobs, like, Pat Shermer did. I'd like to think positively about it, but I just have questions about it. And I guess we'll see as the week goes on. I'm sure on Wednesday we'll hear from Dart. We'll definitely hear from Dable. I don't know if we'll hear from Russ, but, speaking of Russ, I want to talk about what's next at quarterback, specifically for Russ, now that he's been demoted to QB2. Is he going to stay there? And what specifically the future might hold for Russell Wilson and the Giants. We'll have that for you right after this. Hey, Giant fans, Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 2025. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail. because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. Big news from the Giants. They are turning the page, launching the Jaxson Dart era. It's going to start this Sunday when the Giants host the Los Angeles Chargers, the undefeated Los Angeles Chargers. And I sure hope it makes a difference. I really do. I mean, the offense, it's been sluggish, shall we say. It's lethargic. Something's got to be done. I think, as I've said before on this channel, some of the play calling has been an issue. Very bland, very vanilla. I still don't understand how last week they couldn't figure out a way to scheme open Malik Neighbors and Wan'Dale Robinson against the coverages and the schemes they were facing. But, that's neither here nor there. So let's now talk about Russell Wilson and where things go from here for him. Russell Wilson, let me start off by saying really good guy, very positive. You could see him on the sideline during the darkest points of the game, and he's there clapping, cheering, encouraging guys, just trying to be positive. But Russell Wilson, I got to truly believe that he wants to be a starter someplace, right? For the time being, he's going to be QB2. And he's going to say probably, whatever the team needs me to do, I'm here, I'm going to do it, I'm a team player, et cetera, et cetera. Russell Wilson did not come to the Giants to be a QB2. We went through this last year with him, if you remember correctly, right? When Daniel Jones was coming off of the injury, and Russell Wilson made a stop in, and basically he was told that, if Daniel Jones is ready, it's going to be his job. If he's not, you're going to have, the job. And Russell Wilson moved on to Pittsburgh. I would be very, very surprised if the Giants retain Russell Wilson. All right. If Jaxson Dart does well, I think they go to their initial plan, or what the plan was for the future, which was to have Jaxson Dart be the starter and let him be backed up by Jameis Winston. That would mean potentially the Giants look to move Russell Wilson. Now, I don't anticipate Russell Wilson is going to be a distraction for the Giants. That's not in his character. But nobody is going to sit there and convince me that he is accepting of what happened. All right. I say that because, again, as bad as the offense has looked, it's not all 100% on Russell Wilson. You can look at the play calling, you can look at the offensive line, the drop passes, whatever you want to look at. And Dable has said this, it's not all on one guy. But at the end of the day, one guy is being benched. So the Giants, who, remember, don't have any comp picks coming their way, who, I think right now they have 7 draft picks. They might be missing a pick in one of the rounds. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they gave up multiple picks to trade up to get Jaxson Dart from the Texans in the draft. I could see them moving Russell Wilson, especially if he is unhappy enough to where, he says, look, this isn't working out. I want out. Trade me someplace where I can potentially be a starter. Now you look around the league, you've got injuries around the league. The Bengals without Joe Burrow, that's a possible situation. And oh, by the way, you don't think the New Orleans Saints wouldn't welcome somebody of Russell Wilson's caliber down there? They might, so just looking around the league, where would be the best spot, the best landing spot for Russell Wilson? I would inquire with Cincinnati. I would inquire with New Orleans, see what they're willing to give up. Now, do I think the Giants are going to do that? No, they won't do that. You know why? Because the second Joe Schoen makes that call, it comes off as him being maybe desperate to move the player. And we don't even know if they want to move the player. I mean, I think if Russ wants off the team, I think they will accommodate him. But if he says, okay, you know what, whatever you need me to do, I'll do, I think they'll probably look to stay with him, which I think would be a mistake because they can salvage some of that salary cap money that they desperately need. Because as of Tuesday, over the cap had the Giants with, I believe, 1.8 million in salary cap space, which, by the way, is dead last in the NFL. So the Giants need to get salary cap space. And what better way than to move Russell Wilson, whose salary is high priced, move him off the roster, get a draft pick or two in return, and move on. If you're going to stay with Jaxson Dart, moving on. And let Jameis Winston be the backup. Will Joe Schoen do it? Again, I don't see him picking up the phone and calling New Orleans or Cincinnati and saying, hey, you guys want Russ. I think if they pick up the phone, New Orleans and Cincinnati, if they pick up the phone and they say, hey, what's it going to cost for Russ? The danger now becomes with Joe Schoen that he overprices Russ. Yes, Russ is a starting quarterback. I believe he could still be a starting quarterback for a team, right? But the last thing you want to do if you are the Giants is set unrealistic expectations as far as compensation is concerned. You don't want to tell a team, oh, I want a day 2 pick or even a first round pick. You're not going to get a first round pick for Russell Wilson at this point in his career. You're not going to get, I don't think, a day 2 pick at this point in his career. You could maybe hope for a high day 3 pick, maybe a conditional pick down the line if you want to, make the deal really friendly for both sides. But Joe Schoen, as we've kind of seen, and we saw it last year with Azeez Ojulari, tends to overprice his guys. And you just can't do that. Not when you're trying to build up a team. And especially, he's got a hot seat right now underneath him too. Because if this team doesn't pick it up, there is a real possibility that not only would Dable and the coaches be swept out, but Schoen could be possibly swept out. And oh boy, wouldn't that be kind of fun? And I say that, sarcastically, because now, you've got this core that Dable and Schoen have built up with the quarterback that Dable handpicked, and in comes a new coach and possibly a new GM, and you have to start from scratch all over again. So it becomes a vicious cycle, if you will, that the Giants are desperately hoping to avoid, which kind of leads back to why the Giants are making this move now. They're rolling the dice. It's a big gamble. They feel confident that Jaxson Dart can deliver on the gamble. But folks, we won't know until we actually see if that's going to be the case. And I sure hope it is the case, because if not, it's going to be a horrible year. If you thought last year was bad, it's going to be an even worse year for the Giants. All right, Giant fans, coming up next, the Giants made a move at kicker. We'll talk about that one right after this. Hey, Giant fans, the NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Feeling good about Jaxson Dart's debut? Hey, bet on any number of his statistics. What's to lose, right? I personally love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And boy, so much for a slow news day. Tuesday was really, really busy for the Giants. In addition to naming a new starting quarterback, which, by the way, again, the Giants themselves have not made the Jaxson Dart move official, but it's pretty much the direction we all saw coming. If you watched yesterday's show, you know that I said that a move was coming, and I would be surprised if it wasn't. But the Giants also took a step to reinforce their kicker situation. They signed to their practice squad former Falcons kicker Young Waku. Young Waku is 13th all-time in kicking accuracy. He was cut by the Falcons after missing a kick in week 1. Not sure why they were so quick to pull the plug on him, but the Giants bring him in on the practice squad. Now, for those who aren't caught up or maybe missed it, Graham Gano, once again, a guy that, I still don't understand why the Giants didn't do something with that contract, that $5+ million cap hit that he has. I still don't understand that. But Graham Gano, for the third year in a row, is injured. All right. He has that groin injury that he suffered in pregame warmups of all things. All right. So here we are. Gano, he went out and he tried to, kick on Sunday night, couldn't really do it. And the Giants, basically, you go and you look at what they had to do on fourth down. They basically had to go for it on fourth down, probably in situations that they didn't want to because they didn't have Gano. And Jamie Gillen, as a place kicker, couldn't get it done either. So that being said, let's talk about the kicker situation. All right. Now, it's interesting because on the practice squad, the Giants have Jude McIntyre, who has an international IPP exemption, a roster exemption, or I should say a practice squad exemption because of his IPP status. So the bringing in of Koo kind of tells me that maybe McIntyre isn't quite progressing the way that they want him to. Or it also tells me that the Giants are really concerned about Gano's groin. Now, I would not be stunned if Gano lands on IR for the third straight year in a row, and they bring up Koo from the practice squad. I think what the plan is for this week is they're going to let Gano get treatment, see if he can go, and if he can't, you will see Koo brought up as one of the standard practice squad elevations that they make on Saturday before a game. Quite frankly, folks, my gut feeling is Gano goes to IR because the Giants, don't forget, they now have run out of elevations for Elijah Garcia. There's still, especially if Rakeem Nunes-Roches can't go and the other injuries on the defensive front, the inside linebackers is still a mess. They're going to have to do some roster gymnastics to where I can see Koo being signed to the 53. They're going to just have to. I don't see how they can get around it. So the Giants, just an absolute mess right now with, the kicking situation, with the direction the team is going. So many decisions that were made that just don't make sense to me. If you were in such a hurry, and I want to just go back a second to the quarterback situation. I realized that Russ and Jameis Winston, they were signed before the draft, but the Giants had to know that they were eyeing Jaxson Dart or bust. So if you knew that, why spend money on both guys? Why not just spend it on one? That made no sense to me. The Gano situation, again, he's got over $5 million in a cap hit. I think 3.8 or something is 3.8 million, I believe, is his base salary. Look at the salary cap, and there's just so much waste, in my opinion, in this year's salary cap. And I'm not even counting the 22 million they're on the hook for in terms of the prorated signing bonus that was remaining on Daniel Jones's contract. So, we ask ourselves, why are the Giants so bad? These are some of the decisions that are made. And at the time, they might look good on paper, but when you get down to the nitty gritty of it, they're not so good in the long run. And, it's almost like, are they really planning for the long run? So just really difficult time to be a Giant fan right now. It's just, I don't know what they're doing. A lot of times I can understand what they're doing. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand where their thinking is. I can't say that this year. Gano, 37 years old, kicker who had 2 prior, injuries that landed him on IR, looking at a third one. Why wasn't there a reduction or a restructuring of his salary, his contract to say, okay, for every game you're on the field, you get a per game roster bonus. They've done it with other players. Why not do it with Gano? Made no sense to me. And now potentially they're looking at another big ticket player, if you will, landing on IR. Just an absolute mess. So that all being said, Giant fans, what reason is there to continue watching? Well, you've got the Jaxson Dart era starting. For those of you who are at MetLife Stadium on Sunday chanting, "We want Dart, we want Dart," you're going to get your wish. Let's hope that the kid developed far enough to where he can be competent. I think potentially he can help them in the red zone. He's more mobile. He's a little taller than Russ, so maybe he could see things a little clearer. But at the bottom line is that's only part of it. The defense has to hold up. The play calling on offense and defense has to be a lot better than what it's been. The clock management, you name it, everything from top to bottom has to be better for the Giants. And I just don't know that a quarterback change is going to necessarily fix everything. I don't know what this team, what's in store for this team. I wish I had answers for you, but it's just really, really frustrating. Not to mention scary to not know and to possibly even think that this team's season could potentially be over by the time this game on Sunday is played if they go 0-4. And I'll tell you this, I'll leave you with this last thought. If they lose to the Chargers, okay, I think everybody kind of is expecting that. But if the following week they lose to the Saints, you ain't seen nothing yet. I would not be stunned if you start to see people being relieved of their duties if they lose to the Saints and they go 0-5 to start the season. Because John Mara, as I've said before, not a happy camper. Nobody in the organization is. And if you're going to make a big change at quarterback and that's not going to pay dividends, you're going to really have to, you ain't seen nothing yet. That's what it boils down to. So that being said, Giant fans, that'll do it for this edition of Locked On Giants. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. If you made us your first listen of the day, we appreciate that as well. The NFL season is finally here. For your next listen, get a double dose of the Locked On NFL podcast. Tyler, the Madman Rowland, gives you a shot of espresso to start your football day, while Tony Wiggins takes you into the barbershop with the smoothest breakdowns to end the day. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, Giant fans, tomorrow, crossover Thursday with Locked On Chargers. Be there, be square. And then coming up later this week, we're going to hear from Giants cornerback Drew Phillips. So lots more coming your way on the Locked On Giants podcast. We'll see you tomorrow, Giant fans.